Hello again. The news that the United States has dispatched an aircraft carrier, which was until recently stationed in the Middle East to tackle South American drug smugglers, has left many people mystified. A veritable armada of warships is now assembled in the Caribbean on the pretext that the trafficking in drugs must be dealt with firmly by the United States. There is, of course, more to all this than meets the eye. I don't think many people really believe that stopping drug smuggling is the whole purpose of the operation. President Trump has virtually declared war on Venezuela lately. To understand what is really going on, it will be necessary to delve back into American history to the very beginning of the United States as an independent nation in the late 18th century. After the French Revolution, uh, roughly the same period that America declared its independence from Britain, a coalition of European countries launched a war against the French Republic, the one which had replaced the French monarchy, and this segued seamlessly into the Napoleonic Wars, which racked much of the world for the first years of the 19th century. The fighting took place from Scandinavia to South Africa, from the Caribbean to the Middle East, making this the first true world war. Britain managed to involve America in the business by blockading ports in search of French shipping, an action which led to the Anglo-American War of 1812 to 1814. This saw the British landing in America and burning Washington, all of which prompted James Monroe, who became president in 1817, to set out what was to become known as the Monroe Doctrine. This was contained in the annual message to Congress delivered in December 1823, and it became the blueprint for American foreign policy for the next 200 years, right up until the present day, in fact. European countries had a number of colonies in both North and South America during the 19th century, including British possessions such as Jamaica and Spanish ones like Cuba. As a result of a revolt in the Spanish colonies, there was a threat of military intervention from Europe. President Monroe made it plain that America would not tolerate any interference by European powers in any part of the Americas. Specifically, it was said that any attempt by a European nation to extend its influence in the Americas, North or South, would be regarded by the United States as a threat to its own peace and security. The same would apply to the establishment of any new colonies, although America would tolerate those which already existed. At the same time, an assurance was also given that not only would the United States not involve itself in the affairs of existing European colonies in that part of the world, neither would it participate in any purely European wars. The Monroe Doctrine formed the cornerstone of American foreign policy. It continues to be the guiding light of American policy. The United States will not countenance any interference from Europe or Asia in the Americas, either North America or South America. As far as they're concerned, that hemisphere, that half of the world, is theirs. It's their sphere of influence. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a good example of the doctrine in practice, because a power which straddled both Europe and Asia, namely Russia, installed offensive weapons in the Caribbean. And America was quite willing to go to war over what it saw as an absolutely awful and clear-cut violation of its territorial interests. 20 years later, when the Caribbean nation of Grenada seemed to be cozying up to the Soviet Union, the United States once more acted decisively, launching an invasion. Precisely the same thing is now happening in Venezuela. China is, of course, expanding its influence across much of the undeveloped world. Africa and South America are the targets for economic penetration, and the huge oil reserves found in the countries of Venezuela and Guyana have proved to be of particular interest. There has been heavy Chinese investment in those countries, which, since they are so close to the United States, is viewed with extreme disfavor by the administration in Washington. When you combine that with the fact that the Russians have been supplying a lot of modern weaponry to Venezuela, it makes the situation with regard to that country an obvious case for invoking the Monroe Doctrine and putting a stop to the involvement of other nations in what America regards as its backyard. All that was needed to take strong action was a casus belli, a cause of war. This has been handily provided by the fact that an awful lot of drug smuggling does go on in that area, and this gives President Trump an opportunity to disguise military intervention, up to and possibly including an invasion, as a righteous and moral crusade. A marvelous byproduct of such a war would be the chance to revive the Alien Enemies Act, last used during the Second World War to intern Japanese and Germans. This time it could be used for the wholesale deportation of Venezuelans living in the United States. This would tie in with President Trump's decision to suspend the granting of asylum and to talk fiercely about immigrants from the third world. It would provide him with the chance to carry out some serious deportations, which would certainly play well with the American electorate. With the aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford now in position, all the pieces are in place. The visit to the carrier by War Secretary Pete Hegseth on November the 27th is the clearest indication yet that a regime change in Venezuela is coming, and that the Chinese are at the same time being given notice to pack their bags and move to another hemisphere. They're simply not wanted in the Americas.